Today we're going to be talking about two formulas. We're going to be talking about the midpoint formula and the distance formula. And as you can see on the front of this, you have both formulas. So let's jump over here and start with the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is the formula that helps you or lets you figure out the point that is in the middle of a pair of endpoints. So if we look at this graph, your endpoints are where your graph starts and stops. And then your midpoint is the halfway point between your two endpoints. Now, if they give you a graph, yes, sometimes you can just use the graph and your graphing skills to figure out what the midpoint is. But if you look like example 3 and 4 here, they don't give you the graph, so you don't have a visual to try and pick off your midpoint. So we have a formula that we can use. So the formula is right here. And if you notice, it looks a little weird, but to find the midpoint, you take the first x value, you add it to the second x value, and then you divide it by 2. Add your x's, divide by 2. You then do the same for your y's. Y sub 1 plus y sub 2, divide it by 2. So to find the midpoint of two endpoints, you just take your x values, add and divide by 2, and your y values, and add and divide by 2. That will it will calculate the point halfway between them when you do that. So let's see that in action. So let's start with this point down here on the left. So we got to write the ordered pair. So remember your left or right first. So you have to go right 1. So 1 would be that would be positive. Your x would be positive 1. And then we have to go up 1, 2 spaces. So up 2 is positive 2. So my first endpoint is 1, 2. Now let's do that for my second endpoint. So it's over here. So I have to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So right is positive, so positive 7. And then I have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So my y value is positive 6. All right, so let's drop those into my formula. It says x sub 1, that just means your first x value. It doesn't really matter which x value you start with. I'm going to start with the first point that we labeled. So I'm going to say 1, and I'm going to add it to my other x value. My other x value is 7. So 1 plus 7. And our formula says, take those 2 and divide it by 2. Now it is an ordered pair, so that's kind of how I'm going to write it out as. Then go to your first y value. My first y value is 2. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to add it to my second y value, which is 6. And according to my formula, I divide those by 2. Oh, that's not a great 2, is it? 2, okay. So now you just do the math. 1 plus 7 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 2 plus 6 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay. And let's just make sure that checks out with the actual graph. So we think it's 4, 4. Let's see, right 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that would be positive 4. And then to get there, we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So yes, 4, 4 is my midpoint. It is the halfway point between my two endpoints. Midpoint, the point in the middle. Now, here's the good news. The good news is we're going to use Desmos, and Desmos will actually put the stuff into the formula for you as long as you know how to type it in correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot the two endpoints, the 1, 2, and the 7, 6, and then we're going to tell Desmos, hey, I want the midpoint. So to do this, what you want to do is you have to give your endpoints a name. So I'm going to use A and B. Don't ever use X and Y because Desmos will think you're trying to graph some sort of function or line or parabola. So always use A and B or whatever two letters as long as it's not X and Y. So I'm going to say A and I'm going to say equals, and then I'm just going to type in my first ordered pair. So my first endpoint was 1, 2. And don't forget the comma because Desmos has to understand that it's a point. And when you do that, you see it graphed on your graph. Then you go to the next box, use a different letter. I'm going to use B. And I'm going to say B equals, and I'm going to type in the second endpoint, which was 7, 6. Okay, and look, Desmos has now graphed that. Now, all you have to do is you want the midpoint, then go to your keyboard and type in the word midpoint. Okay, now when you do that, excuse me, it doesn't know what you want the midpoint of, so you have to tell Desmos, hey, I want the midpoint of, put parentheses, always parentheses, A, point A, comma, and point B. And when you do that, Desmos will graph another point. And to get the answer, just tap. Ta-da! 4, 4. So you just have to tell Desmos what you're looking for. That's all you got to do. Now we're going to work smarter, not harder. So we're going to leave that in Desmos and come back and now look at another example. Find the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints 1, -2, and -2, 7. Now you absolutely can do this by hand and drop things into your formula. But since I know Desmos will do it for me, I'm just going to make sure I input my endpoints in. Now here's where I'm working smarter. I didn't erase any of this because all I'm going to do is come up here and take out the 1, 2, and my new endpoint is 1, and again, don't forget your comma, -2, and then I'm going to take out these 7, 6, and my other endpoint is -2, 7. Okay, that way I don't have to retype A equals B equals in the word midpoint. So I type that in, awesome, tap. Okay, now, don't freak out. Can you get decimals? Absolutely, because you're looking for a halfway point. They're not always going to be whole numbers. So my midpoint turns out to be -0.5 or -0.5 and +2.5 or +2.5. And that's it. You just come over here and you write your answer. -0.5 is my X value, and 2.5 is my Y value. All right, so you guys try this example. Do it in Desmos. Desmos is your best friend. Just make sure you type in your endpoints correctly. Use the minus sign for negative, and I'll give you like 1 minute. All right, so again, A equals, and then your first ordered pair. -4, comma, -4. Exactly how we write ordered pairs. Desmos graphs it. Then I say B equals my next ordered pair, which is -2 and -8. Now, what are we looking for? And see, you can't see that on your graph, right? So zoom out a little. You got to go find it. There they are. Now, I'm looking for midpoint, so I'm just going to say, Desmos, I'm looking for midpoint. Okay, tell it the 2 points you want it to look at. We want you to look at point A and B. And once you do that, Desmos will graph it for you, tap it, and there's your answer, -3, -6. Okay, so we like Desmos, especially now. Okay, this is one of the few things that Desmos will actually help you do. Okay, so the halfway point between -2 and -8 and -4, -4 happens at -3, -6. All right, so now let's look at distance. Distance is a different formula, and it's a little bit more complicated. It's the square root. If you want to find the distance, remember distance is how far it is between 2 points. So you have to take the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. A lot of stuff going in there, okay? But we're going to do it so you can see it. All right, so again, if we look at this graph, okay, when they're talking about distance, they want to know how far is it from this point right here to this point up here. That's what they want to know. How far is it? How far is it to go from that point up to this point? All right, so we have a formula for it so we can plug in, but we're going to write our ordered pairs down. Okay, and this is not something, if you have the graph, that you can just, necessarily figure out yourself like we could for midpoint. Sometimes this is not something you can do that with. So let's write our ordered pair. So to get to this first point here that I have in purple, I have to go to the right, 1, 2. So that would be +2. And then I have to go up 1, 2. So it's 2, 2. Now let's write our ordered pair for the green point up here. So to get there, I have to go right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I went right 5. And then I have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. Okay, so that endpoint is 5, 6. So we want to figure out how long that blue line is. How far is it between those 2 points? So we're going to use our formula. Now, people are not a super big fan of this formula because it is a little bit more complicated. But right now we're not doing anything but with the square root, but writing it down. So we're going to do x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Second x value minus first x value. And again, it doesn't matter what you call 1 and 2. They already labeled what I have in purple as the first ordered pair, x sub 1, y sub 1, right here. And so this green dot, they're calling x sub 2, y sub 2. So let's start there. Second x value is 5. So we're going to say 5. Now the formula says subtract 5 minus your first x value. My first x value, that's my purple point, is 2. So 5 minus 2, okay, and what I have to do with that is subtract and then square that number. Plus, now y sub 2, my second y value. Again, that's my green point. So we're going to say 6 minus, formula says minus, my second y value, which is 2. So 6 minus 2, and they want me to square that. Okay, so yeah, this is a little bit more math intensive, and it's easier to make a mistake. So let's do the math. Again, not touching the square root right now. 5 minus 2 is 3, and they want us to square that. Plus, and you can get rid of your parentheses once you do the 5 minus 2. 6 minus 2 is 4. Still want us to square it. Now we have to square both of those. 3 squared, or 3 times 3, that would be 9. 4 squared, 4 times 4, that would be 16. Okay, then I got to add 9 and 16. It's 25. And then I got to take the square root. Square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so what we just figured out is between my 2 points, 2, 2, and 5, 6, the distance is 5. Now, we don't know if that's 5 feet or 5 yards or 5 inches or 5 centimeters. They didn't tell us, but we really don't need to know that. We just know that from the first point to the second point, it's 5 units. Excuse me. Now, here's the good news. Because I know a lot of you are looking at that going, "Ooh, that's a bit intense." It is a little cumbersome. Okay, it's easy to make a mistake if you go too fast. You got to take your time. There's a lot of math in there. The good news is your BFF Desmos again will do the distance for you. So you got to plot the 2 points again. So A, and it doesn't matter which way you put it in. I'm just going to do A is my 2, 2. And I'm going to do B is my 0.56. And again, if you wanted to call A 5, 6 and then B 2, 2, that's fine. It doesn't really make a difference. Now, again, can't see the points on my graph, so I'm going to get to where I can see them. All right, there they are. I want the distance this time. I want to know how far it is from point A to point B. So you just type in the word distance. Okay, tell Desmos what you want it to do. Now, you do have to give Desmos the 2 points. Okay, so we called the first point A and the second point B, because you got to tell Desmos where to look. And ta-da, all of that math we just did, Desmos calculates it all for you. Okay, so from point A to point B is 5 units, which is what we figured out by hand. All right, so let's do the next one. They call it example 1. So we got 4, negative 6, and 0, 3. So again, being smart about this, leaving the A equals and B equals. So I'm going to type in 4, negative 6, and my second point is 0, 3. And I always, here you don't necessarily need to see your 2 points to get a visual, but I like to make sure that they look like they're both on my graph. So I'm going to zoom out a little to find the other one. So there's the other one. So how far is it from point A, which is down here, to point B? It's 9.8, blah, 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 blah. Okay. A lot of these will come out to be decimals. They're not going to be pretty whole numbers. And so if you do get a decimal, just round to nearest tenth. So that would be one number behind your decimal. So 9.84, that would round to 9.8. So that's how far it is between those 2 points, 9.8 units. All right, so you guys try this one. Negative 4, 2, 0, negative 8. All right, so again, type them in as 2 points. I used A and B. You can use any 2 letters except X and Y. Get a visual just to make sure that you got both points on Desmos or in Desmos. Okay, you might have to zoom in or zoom out. And there are my 2 points. I can see them. Type them in. Again, you're looking for distance. So you just tell Desmos, hey, I want distance. You got to tell Desmos which 2 points you want it to look at. So we want Desmos to use A and B. And so there's my distance. The distance from point A to point B is 10.77. Again, we're going to round that. Okay, so 10.77 is going to round to 10.8. Okay, so it's 10.8 units between those 2 points. So that is it. We're just going to do everything in Desmos. That saves you doing the math behind your formulas, and it also saves you from having to memorize them. Because in the past, we've had to memorize both of our formulas and use them. But now that it's available on Desmos, you guys use that to your advantage, so you don't have to do all of the calculations yourself.